Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me as always, the man, the myth, the legend, the goatiest of all F1 goats to have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm good, Cameron. I was slightly under the weather over the weekend, some sort of food bug. I'm not quite sure what it was exactly, but I've seemed to be okay now. And early mornings, all the rest of it, all kind of right at the end of the video yesterday, I was getting a bit croaky and running out of steam, but got there in the end. A few dramas with the computer as well, so I had a fairly lively weekend, all told, given everything else that was going on in Melbourne.
Go on to that point then, Peter. What do you make, as is customary now?
Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest story to come out of the Australian Grand Prix Round 1 2026?
I think the big story is that I'm not an 18 to 25-year-old that watches Netflix incessantly, because it looked to me as if that's what that new formula, and therefore the first race, the showcase race, was giving us. Everything that, as I understand it, the Netflix show and the young audience want. They're not really interested in anything that happened in the past or any of the great overtakes we've had in the past, or indeed whether or not cops can be taken in seventh or eighth gear at Silverstone. They're much more interested in the color of the shoes that Carlos Sainz might be wearing to the track, or what the presenters look like, or whether there's an argument going on between Esteban Ocon and his boss, or, you know, all the things that actually are unimportant, as we all know. And then they just want to see a motor race, few overtakes if possible, and they want a podium and lots of champagne and everybody happy and screaming and shouting, and that's what we got. But if you talk to me as me, I would say I've never seen a Grand Prix race that was so, what's the right word? I've got to find the right word here, because on one side of the coin, the sort of slightly technical wizardry side of Formula One is shouting loudly at me saying, isn't it amazing that these cars can do what they're doing? And on the other side of the fence, or my brain, there's a voice shouting loudly saying, well, so what? I want to see a motor race in proper cars. I want to see proper overtakes with great drivers, and I want to see great driving by great drivers. And so I'm not torn at all. I'm obviously on the side of the second second one that I mentioned, and that is that we didn't actually. I think it was just computer gaming, wasn't it? It was sort of 8 place changes in 8 laps and for the lead, and it was just ridiculous. Nothing meant anything. All the overtakes were under acceleration rather than braking or turning in, which is an insult, I think, to the talent of all the great racing drivers we have today in the world, and indeed all the great racing drivers of the past. And I suppose for most of the race, I was actually thinking of some of the other great overtakes we've had, some of the great overtakes we've had in years gone. And let's take one that most people know, perhaps even the Netflix viewers know, and that is Barcelona 91, Senna and Mansell side by side, eyeball to eyeball. High speed straight, breaking into turn 1. Nobody knows who's going to give way first. Just one of the classic moments. Or if you like, Mika Hakkinen against Michael Schumacher at Spa at the end of the main straight with Ricardo Zonta there. Neither of those overtakes would have happened with the new regulations that we now have. And now, if everybody's happy with that, then I don't know what to say, because Formula One teams in general, and that's why I'm wearing this cap today, in general, are comprised of racers, not people that want this ridiculous forced artificial overtaking. And ultimately, I suppose I'm getting to the point now of what really is the most significant thing. Ultimately, this was a computer game by the big manufacturers who have been allowed to come in and play around with our sport, by which I mean Audi, really, because I think acquiescing to Audi and having Audi basically say we're not going to come in unless you get rid of the MGUH is not only unprecedented in Formula One history, but also incredibly stupid, because MGUH was something that Formula One had nurtured very well over the last 12 years. And it had become part of Formula One. The vernacular had become part of Formula One, and it was starting to find its way onto road cars. I understand Porsche are using it, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the Ferrari F80 actually has, I mean, it's got a lot of hybrid power there. I'd say 80% of it is hybrid power on the Ferrari road car, F80. But I think they have an MGUH to do that, and to take away effectively the front brakes from the car and make all the drivers rely on the rear means that the art of getting into a corner really well in a Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc way and overtaking into a corner well in a Nigel Mansell, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton way, and many others, of course, Etten way, is kind of gone. And it doesn't do anything for me to see a driver just surging past on acceleration out of a corner. What is that all about? If I was an electric car, road car freak, I'd be thinking, oh, this is brilliant, but I'm not. So you're talking to me, and I'm not. You know, I've got a Hyundai i20N, which I love. I've got a Rally 2 Skoda, which I love, and that's it. You know, I drive, and I've got a Lotus Cortina, and I've got a Lotus Elan. So that's me, and I like motor racing. And Nigel Mansell passing Gerhard Berger on the outside of the last corner in Mexico is what Grand Prix racing for me is all about. It's not about these sort of power surge passes and Charles, bless him, having to go massively offline and very quick bits of road, throwing up the dust and the dirt, getting his tires filthy, just to try and make a bit of a motor race to stop George walking away with it. That's not, to me, that's not what it's all about. But there are lots of depths to all that, which is Mercedes obviously love it, and their arch rival Audi created this new championship for them. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? And then there's the role played by Ferrari, who must be thinking, well, this is good. You know, we're going much better than we have before. So these regulations are brilliant. We love them. But at the same time, you know, wait and see. Be careful for what you ask, I say.
Oof, oof. But Peter, surely there were 120 overtakes this year as versus only 45. So some said that the racing that we got at the start of the first 10, 15 laps was electric between George and Charles. That, I mean, Crofty on the Sky Sports internationally syndicated broadcast said you can no longer say that we don't get overtaking in F1. Look at this. This is impossibly brilliant, surely, Peter. To that you say what, sir?
Well, I say he's completely missing the point. They weren't overtakes. They were power surges. It's a completely different thing. An overtake is a proper pass in Formula One that goes right back to, I don't know, 1905, maybe even the 19th century. And that's a proper overtake where one driver is doing something on the entry to a corner to enable him to get past another. When you've got a car just with more power coming out of a corner quicker and accelerating, that's not an overtake. It's just a power surge. It's ridiculous. And anybody who calls it an overtake doesn't know what they're looking at or talking about. I'm sorry, you know, and all that stuff, you're absolutely right. It was electric. Exactly the point. And that's the problem with it.
It's a problem, Peter, isn't it, this? I think this is the conversation that we're going to... I'm wary, though. I'm on your side of the fence, Peter, and Max's, who said that this is the sort of stuff that he would do. Mario Kart, Lando Norris saying that this is awfully artificial. So too, Charles Leclerc said in the car whilst he was driving that this feels a lot like a Mario Kart mushroom. It's a little bit contrived, Peter. It is the best way that I've heard it terms.
Yeah, but how contrived is it, given everything that's happened over the last 6 or 7 years with Drive to Survive and the whole Liberty build-up and the whole business of, as you keep reminding me, somebody at F1 saying that it's just a show, it's a business, it's not a sport. You say it's contrived, but can you imagine if they announced tomorrow that instead of actually holding a Grand Prix in, I don't know, let's say Austin, Texas, instead of holding the American Grand Prix on the racetrack, indeed what was going to happen was that all the Grand Prix drivers were going to be on the grid with computer screens in front of them, and they're all going to be playing one massive computer game and never getting in their cars, but just sitting there behind these screens. All the fans had to pay the same price, but they could come and mingle on the grid and talk to the drivers. And if you were a Leclerc fan, you could stand over Charles' shoulder. And if you're a Lewis fan, you could stand over Lewis's shoulder. You think they wouldn't get a lot of people there? I think they would. If they built it up now and they had all the rock concerts and everything else going on that we're told is important for Formula One's growth, I think you'd get a lot of, I don't know, 12 to 25-year-olds there, probably. Maybe not 25-year-old, 12 to 19-year-olds, which we're told is the prime audience that everybody has to cater for. You'd probably get quite a lot of people there. I hate to say it, but you probably would. Next step, driverless cars.
Oh my gosh, Pete, what have
You know, or maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the Grand Prix drivers on the grid with their computers or in the pit lane driving these driverless cars. We're not far away. I mean, if you look at the reaction of all the drivers, and I think most of the countries of the world, I'm not sure that. I mean, let's talk about Mercedes. Who would the Germans have thought that was a brilliant motor race yesterday? The Germans aren't massively behind the Mercedes Formula One team. They don't even have a Grand Prix in their country. I mean, a British driver, car made in Great Britain, and, you know, that's it. Audi, well, yeah, maybe. They got what they wanted and they got points in their first race. Good luck to them. No MGUH. But who else would have thought that was brilliant? But do you think the Max fans loved that race yesterday?
No.
No. Do you think the Ferrari fans are really excited about all this? Possibly. But, you know, do Ferrari fans, who ultimately are Italian, you know, boy racers, girl racers, do they really like the sound of a Ferrari backing off halfway down the straight? Do they really like that?
No.
I mean, all that stuff is very clever and very, I don't know, what's the right word? Creative, I suppose, innovative. But it all should be in WEC or some other category where motorsport is showing what it can do so well. It shouldn't be in Formula One. Formula One didn't need to do that. Formula One, in my opinion, as I've said a million times, should have adopted Formula E as a sort of low category alongside Formula 3 that could take place over most Grand Prix weekends, and the teams could help the development of the cars and be seen, therefore, to be going E-friendly. But Formula One itself, I think, should be reliable, relatively cheap, V8, maybe V10 engines, and all the emphasis should have been on sustainable fuel and everything else that Formula One's doing really well. The net zero thing of how they travel around the world and all the great materials they use and the way they organize their logistics. All of that is brilliant Formula One stuff. But don't start making the engines, you know, it's ridiculous the way they've done that with the engines. There was no need to do that. And even if they'd just kept the MGUH, everything probably would still be okay. But doing that, they've taken a step too far, in my opinion. They've taken away the great corners and the great overtakes.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I was talking to somebody quite important in one of the Formula One teams over the weekend about this. And I made the point about, do you realize some of the great corners are now out of Formula One because the approach speeds are not going to be anything like as high as they should be? And he said, interestingly enough, that point was raised very early in the discussions of these new 2026 regulations. And there's a lot of talk about it. And in the end, it was shouted down.
That's damning, Peter.
Well, it's not good, is it? It just shows that, I don't know, what were Ferrari doing? I mean, if any team has its feet in the history of the sport, it's Ferrari. And if any team is in a perfect position, really, to define the way Formula One's future should be going, it's Ferrari. They're not a big manufacturer in the Mercedes sense of the word. They're not a small race team in the Gene Haas sense of the word. They are Ferrari, and they're in a really nice position to say, no, this isn't going to work. This is wrong. This is what the history of Formula One's all about. This is what we believe is the way forward. And if you're not going to do that, we're out. But I don't know, what is Ferrari today? It's John Elkann, who I guess is more Wall Street than he is, you know, pit lane. And that's the problem, isn't it?
Just a little bit, Peter. Let me ask you this, though, Peter. A lot of people said to me that they felt like it was a bit of a propaganda job over the course of the weekend. That, I mean, for me at least, when I hear, I don't know, Charles Leclerc going into turn one, and the climax is seeing these cars that have got 1,000 brake horsepower, whether they can keep it on the island going into a turn one, or like you said on your video, a turn 9, turn 10. And as we get to these turns and you're on board and you're listening to the engine, the suspense kind of crescendos, and then before you get to the turn, you can hear this really anticlimactic whir of the engine when everything all of a sudden becomes the combined harvest, the championship. But do you think, though, Peter, that the problem is less the rules and the regs as they're written and the combined harvest, the championship, as some people term it, and not more the translation of what's going on the track, that we can't see the state of charge of the batteries, so that we can't translate for why, I don't know, Charles has overtaken George Russell? Is the real problem not that we that we can't understand the wheres and the whys as they're going on track in real time?
Well, it's a good question, because I thought that would be the problem, that we don't have the graphics that tell us, or the audio, whatever it is that we need to have, that tell us precisely what's going on and give us the details of that specific overtake. But having watched Melbourne now, I don't think that is the problem, because I think you can just tell by the engine note what is going on. And what is going on is what didn't go on when Mika Häkkinen passed Michael Schumacher at Les Combes at Spa. We didn't have Mika Häkkinen looking across the road at Michael as both their engines suddenly lost revs and power 100 meters before Les Combes, and they're just looking at one another going slowly, wondering who's going to go slowest. We didn't have that. We had them both absolutely flat out and wondering who was going to brake latest. And much more, and just as significantly, I think, we had Ricardo Zonta on the right, who was a bit sort of, discombobulated by the approach of these two cars, and Mika doing a perfect job. But imagine if that was today and Ricardo Zonta slow, all he would be doing would be harvesting. He'd be going 10 times slower than he was, and Mika probably would have gone straight into the back of him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just ridiculous. And to me, as I keep saying, an overtake is something that requires planning and very, very precise judgment in the most critical part of a corner, which is the approach. And some drivers can do that really well, some less well. Some feel pretty comfortable on the outside where the marbles come into play, some don't. But when you accelerate out of a corner faster than somebody else and you just have more power, that is not an overtake. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. That's just a power surge, and it means nothing to me. It should not be listed as an overtake. And whether we understand why George at that point has got more power than Charles, does it really matter? Does that make it any more palatable? I don't think it does.
So I think, so this is again a thesis that's been put forth by a lot of the F1 community, that I think the broadcast, what they're trying to do, and failing, Peter, is make every overtake look like Charles Leclerc's overtake on the rest of them into turn one, which was a decent manoeuvre, a proper overtake, because he was last of the late breakers and it was traction limited. But if they're crafty enough on the broadcast, Peter, and don't show us the state of charge, that some of these yo-yo overtakes, as they call them, will look to the unacquainted eye like a proper overtake. Do you know what I mean? And that's the problem that a lot of people have, that if they're sufficiently opaque in the way that they broadcast, that we don't see a state of charge. It's hard to discern between a Charles Leclerc overtake going into turn one, which, as you say, is a proper overtake, or, I don't know, the yo-yo overtakes that Charles and George were doing to each other on lap 2, lap 3. It's almost like...
But Cameron, you don't need that graphic. If you're a decent commentator, you know that if one car's just out accelerating another out of a corner, you don't need a graphic to tell you that he's got more power at that point. Why do you need to clutter up the screen with all those graphics? You don't. You keep it simple. This guy's got more power. He harvested more power on the previous straight. Okay, big deal. Go off and drive a Formula E car then, please.
Yeah.
That's the problem we've got. And the real problem is that the drivers like Charles and Max, let's highlight those two, no longer really have the same advantage. I was hoping and thought that they probably would, because that harvesting business into corners appeared initially to be something they could do differently and do more with. But it isn't. It's such a basic thing. And they've got to be so deliberate in the way the engines are set up, that they can't really gain anything there, being as good as they are into the first phase of a corner. And that's why, not in any way, I'm a Lewis fan for anybody gets upset about this. But that is why Lewis is looking quite good alongside Charles now, because that whole business of what Charles used to be able to do in a very difficult car, which was a very, very light back end, flick oversteer, very pointy car that Charles could always get the lap time out of, i.e. last year's Ferrari, which Lewis was finding so difficult to drive. That's gone away now, because the whole thing has been dumbed down by this business of generating power into the corners. And Lewis is basically doing the same thing as Charles now. And then it's just a question of rotation point and exit, which Lewis obviously can still do incredibly well. And that's why he's looking quite good. These regulations have neutralized the talent of Charles and Max, particularly, and probably some others coming up as well.
That's damning, Peter.
Well, it is. It is, and if you put any of the great drivers from the past in your mind, you put them in these cars, I don't think they'll be able to do anything more than, Lindblad or, I don't know, Hajar. Two young guys who are doing very well in those cars. Yeah. And that's because they just, the brain is on it. They know how to run this thing. They've been doing sims all winter, and they're really sharp in those areas. But that's not racing driving, feeling the surface of the road area. It's all organizing it's all organizing the power management, and that's a problem for me. That's a problem because racing for me is about touch and feel. It's not about electronics. It's not about digital readouts. It's always been that final little bit. Has always been about the gaps between the digits, and that's what Max and Charles do so well with the throttle, the steering, and the brakes. But that's been neutralized now. That's gone away. It hasn't gone away completely, probably, and I'm looking forward to seeing turn 1A, 1B going at Suzuka, for example. I can't think of, I suppose in China, it's going to be that quick left-hander, one, two, three, it's probably about turn, I don't know, 7 or 8, the very fast left-hander. But again, they'll probably be, engine will probably be coming out of revs going into that, and that'll no longer be a demanding corner as well. What else is, China's just... That first corner is spectacular, but it is what it is. It's tightening radius, so it doesn't really set the world on fire.
No, Peter, what do you think the solve is? Because if they change the rules, then they disenfranchise Audi, and then Audi pack their bags and
wouldn't that be terrible? Let's just talk about that. I'm not talking about Audi in particular now, but this whole business of why is Formula One so obsessed and has been so obsessed in the last 5 years with having more manufacturers? Why? All the manufacturers that we want are in WEC. Formula One is about Formula One race teams. They're all prototype companies. That is why Bernie and the boys, all those years ago, said, in 1981 indeed, let's make Formula One so difficult and so engineering orientated that nobody can ever come into our little castle and take away our toys. We will have a new rule which says that in order to compete in the World Championship, you must design and build your own car. Wow. No other form of motorsport has ever had that rule. And we still have it in Formula One. So why do we need manufacturers in the sport? I'll tell you why. So that the Lawrence Strolls can sell it on a branding deal to Aston Martin. Now you think, there's Windsor on an anti-Stroll thing again, but I'm actually saying that is a perfect use actually of a manufacturer. What Stroll is doing, to my mind, is perfect. He's keeping it as a race team, an Adrian Newey, team principal, Lawrence Stroll run relatively small prototype company relative to big car companies. And he's sold basically the brand and the logo to Aston Martin, but you don't have a lot of Aston Martin heavies standing around the garage telling you how to design and build the car. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But that is the thin end of the wedge, because the minute that sort of, if we've got a Formula One team, our big sellout point is going to be to a car company. We've got to do that. That's why they want them in the sport. That's what's happened with Sauber. You think Sauber are unhappy to have been bought by Audi and all that money that's coming in. The problem is that Audi didn't say, okay, we'll brand you Sauber and you just carry on doing what you're doing. We'll design our own car, we'll do our own engine. And that's where the problem is, because as soon as you allow that to happen, they then use the weight of their money and their power and their global stature to say, and we don't want MGUH. And they start playing around with all the things that Formula One knows work well.
Yeah.
And nobody had the bravery or the logic to stand up to Audi and say, well, in that case, we don't want you. Nobody did that because they're so scared that a manufacturer might leave and money might go out of the sport. That's the problem. And if Audi leaves, somebody else might leave. Thin end of the wedge on that respect. But so what? As I keep saying, imagine if Eddie Jordan was here today and you said to Eddie, do you think it's great that the big manufacturers have come in and Audi have said you no longer have MGUH on the car and we've got really false overtaking now that people are confusing with power surges? What do you think Eddie would be saying? Eddie would be saying, no, come, let's all forget Formula One. Let's go back and start a new category of racing, wouldn't he? Let's go. If necessary, we'll go and race wheelbarrows, But we're not going to have this rubbish. And that's the problem. It's the minute you let big manufacturers come in, it changes this private club that is still Formula One in the way it does it with its incredible prototype companies. And And it's the same with WEC. We have lots of manufacturers. So let them do all that stuff. Take MGUH off the cars or whatever they want to do. Let them do all that electric stuff at Le Mans. Everything. Brilliant. No problem. But don't play with Formula One because it is about small specialist prototype companies. It's not about big manufacturers. And to some extent, you've got to give credit to Toto Wolff because he kind of runs Mercedes that way. He's done a very good job of not allowing Mercedes car company to come in and interfere with things. And I get the impression, I don't know for sure, but if Toto had said at some point last year, whatever you do, we don't want to vote for the elimination of MGUH, Mercedes board would have said, oh yeah, okay, we get you. I'm not saying that happened, and maybe there was some deal with Audi, and Mercedes thought, oh well, if we get Audi in, it's good for us because we're going to blow them away anyway, so it'll sell more cars, and therefore we will countenance the deletion of the MGUH, and that may well have been the case because look how well they're going without it. But they're the only people going well really without it, and we do know they've still got, for the next few races, they've still got that slight advantage probably with the compression ratio. Probably didn't make that much difference. Depends on which circuit you're looking at, I guess, for that. We'll see. But I'm sure they've got enough time to get around that now. They know what's going to happen. And their advantage is big enough anyway. They've done a good enough job with the car, and the drivers are great, and they'll still be very, very good. But in general, I think the problem is that Formula One has had this obsession for too long now. Even though WEC has been doing a great job of attracting all these manufacturers, Formula One's had this obsession of having to have big car companies as a backdrop, basically to sell to when they want to sell out, the smaller teams, that is. And this at a time when there's never been more money coming in from pay television for Formula One and TV rights, and everybody's making a fortune, and they're well in capable of getting the right budget within the budget cap we have. So there's no need to be going out and worrying about things like that. If all the big TV companies were pulling out, that's something else to worry about, but they're not. So why is everybody panicking about having all these car companies in Formula One all the time? What is the obsession with these car companies? I don't get it. They're in the sport anyway. They're in WEC. So why do we need them in Formula One?
Yeah, I think there is a mainstream cachet that comes with having a Cadillac and an Audi. It's almost like United Colours of Benetton. They're giving us the rubber stamp, and therefore we are at the forefront of all things automotive industry, like F1's always been obsessed with being, isn't it, Peter? Now, let me ask you this.
Well, but just on that point, surely an even bigger point, though, is Formula One is the world's biggest global annually televised sport, and its ratings are rocketing. And if Liberty wanted to sell at any point, for sure they could double their money. So isn't that the point? It's not, walking down Wall Street, wow, we've got 9 manufacturers in the sport instead of 6 that we used to have, which is better, the ratings, the numbers, the money coming in from TV rights, or is it, wow, look at that, we've got Cadillac, we've got Audi, isn't that amazing? I don't think it is that. I think everybody's much more orientated towards TV rights and income from that area. It's only the teams that ultimately think, well, it's not bad to be able to sell to a car company. Look at Sauber, look how much money they've made. Isn't it that? Isn't it Stroll saying, yeah, we'll get Aston to pay all the bills?
I think it's the year-on-year conversation, Peter. I think that there is an incessant need, again, if you have your favourite word, shareholders in the room, that there will be this desperate
Stakeholders
need.
Is my favourite word, STAK, yeah.
That there's an incessant need, a fiduciary responsibility to provide shareholder value, right? And the year-on-year conversation is driven by, okay, so how did you grow the market? Perfect. The financial the reports last year were gangbusters and record revenue, record profits, etc., etc. But what are you going to do this year to grow the market more than you did last year? And whilst it might not be the right way, and there's potentially more downside than there is upside, at the very least, when Stefano gets to his annual general meeting with all of the stakeholders and or shareholders, you can say, well, I grew the market this year versus last year by bringing in Cadillac F1. Look at all of the promotion that they're doing as far as the Super Bowl and getting new American eyes on the sport. So too with Audi, that was an in brackets an untapped market, he will say. So that I get the reason, but I sit with you on that side of the fence, Peter. I think there's potentially more downside than up.
I mean, in fairness to Stefano, he is ultimately a racer. So I don't think we should ever really, we should never really assume what's going through Stefano's soul, because I think he is a racer and he's a very good man. I think if you're standing in front of the board, and Formula One will continue to grow this year, there's no doubt about it. There's a number of areas in which you can always point, whether it's selling more signage, whether it's TV rights, whether it's more races on the calendar, whether it's making up for races that have suddenly been postponed on the calendar, whether it's more car companies coming into the sport, whether it's more television exposure. There's a number of ways you can cut the cake. So, Stefano's very, very sharp, and he knows how to address a board and give figures if everything's moving in the right direction. There's no problem with that at all. But if, let's say, for example, we had not changed the regulations, and indeed the regulations had gone the other way. Let's say that at the beginning of the end of 23, they'd announced that from 26 onwards, we were going back to normally aspirated V8 engines using a very, very sophisticated reusable fuel, very, very green fuel. And Formula One was going to take X number of steps even further towards net zero carbon platform and footprint. But everything was going back to basically square one in terms of the technology in Formula One, and all the emphasis was going to be on the racing and the driving and the racetracks and the spectacular Formula One that everybody has known and loved for so many years. And let's say in 2026, the World Championship came by the end of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Was it Vegas? Whatever the second last race is, I can't remember. Is it Vegas? Yeah, Vegas. After the Vegas Grand Prix, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and Lando Norris were separated by 5 points going into the last race at Abu Dhabi. Do you think that Formula One would be less rich than it will be at the end of the 2026 we have right now?
No.
Okay. 100%. End of story. It's quite simple, isn't it? And that would have cost the teams much less, and there would have been much better racing throughout the year, and everything would be less complicated. Now, if it meant that we didn't have Audi in the sport, and we didn't have Cadillac in the sport, and Renault had also, well, I don't think Renault would have pulled out in those conditions. I think Renault probably would have stayed. And maybe some other car company might have come in. Who knows? Maybe Toyota would have come back in. But let's assume 3 of the manufacturers we have in today were not in this championship I've just described. Do you think that really would have hurt things? Hurt the bottom line?
No, but
that Stefano was having to deliver to his board?
No,
exactly.
Yeah.
I rest my case. That is the point. That is the ultimate point. And because racing is about those amazing climaxes. It's about those amazing overtakes. It's about amazing racing. It's not about even having to worry about whether the overtake needs to be described technically or not. We shouldn't even have to be having that discussion. It should be so clear. It's like a tennis player. If he hits the ball in the net, you don't really have to talk about it. He hit the ball in the net. We can all see it. If Nigel Mansell passes Gerhard Berger on the outside of the last corner in Mexico, we don't really have to say too much except, and that's the problem. We don't need these little graphics of the batteries and everything on the thing. And to what avail? To what avail is all this? I suppose one thing, I'm going back, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here, but there's one thing that I think actually is quite positive about these 2026 Formula One cars. And that is that, in my mind, there are far too many boy racers with too much money who buy hypercars on the road these days. And if the cool thing now, as shown by Formula One, is to back off on the straight and go much slower on the straight, then that's quite a good thing from a safety point of view, isn't it? Instead of doing, 193 on the Autobahns in Germany, they're going to start doing 125. Oh, listen to this. The engine's gone into cutting mode. Oh, isn't that cool? Yeah, speed limiter, whatever they want to say. They probably think it's quite cool now to be backing off. That's quite good. But that's what percentage of the population? I don't know, 0.0000001% of the population to which that applies. But it is quite a good thing from a safety point of view. But that's the only thing I can see, because I don't buy Formula One growing this technology in its own unique way, because I think this technology could easily have grown if they'd thrown it at WEC or anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's enough good people in WEC for this technology to be used there, and for these cars at WEC to be doing the same thing, or a modification thereof. We didn't need to do it in Formula One. Formula One is about a show, and it is about 5 drivers being in the running for the World Championship, going into the last race. It's not about one team because of its technology and its might dominating things with cars that don't allow you to really to highlight the talent of guys like Max and Charles. And I'm just so happy for Max that he's got something like the Nürburgring 24 hours to think about, because imagine how a guy of his talent is thinking about the year now. At least he can think, oh, I'm doing these races in a proper car quite quick, and it's going to be at fun circuits, and I'm going to do the Nürburgring as well, and I'm going to drive on some great tracks and have some fun and continue to be a race driver. That's what's going to keep him sane this year.
Yeah,
I can tell you that now.
Do you think the rules and regs as they stand, Peter, increase the probability that Max Verstappen just hangs up his Nomex and says, at the end of 27, I've had enough of this. This is rubbish. Even if I am winning, I'm not enjoying this. I only get one life. I may as well go and race GT3s. What's the point?
Well, if Max wins the Nürburgring 24 hours and a couple of other races in that AMG thing with the Red Bull, which looks amazing, doesn't it? It looks unbelievable. And more people go and watch that than start watching Formula One at the same, within a week or two of the same races. And I don't know, George wins the championship by 57 points from Kimi, who's 120 points ahead of anybody else. I think Max can sit back at the end of that year and think, wow, what a great year. What a fabulous year. I really enjoyed that year. I've won this, I won that, and I'm kind of into Formula One again a little bit. They need to change the rules a bit, but he'll just carry on doing what he's doing. I think it's quite a good balance, isn't it? He's got Formula One, which might come his way a few times a year, and then he's got all this other really cool stuff he's doing. Next, he'll be in his dad's Skoda, even better.
I know that people say Formula One is bigger than any one driver, Peter, but if we have the conversation,
do they say that?
Well, some people try and say, right, that if Max retires, I think they said recently that, I want to say it was Stefano that said this, if Lewis and Alonso retires, F1 could survive the drop-off in...
Of course it will survive, but at any given moment, it's about the drivers. Of course it'll survive in the same way that, if the whole thing implodes, everyone will be out there racing wheelbarrows if necessary. Well, the racers will be. And that's why, with respect, people like you and hopefully me should continue to cover the races in a relatively objective way, because it is what it is, and everybody's got the same opportunity at the start of the year, if you like, clean sheet of paper. So we shouldn't just walk away from it. That's what very, very superficial Formula One fans who just come in for the this or that, and it's not there, they just disappear. That's not you. I know that's certainly not me. So that's not the case. It'll survive, but I think, but what does that mean? Survive. Right now, if you said to people, what is more impressive, watching how Mercedes have got on top of this technology and are winning the way they are and passing people with abandon out of corners on sheer acceleration runs, or watching Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton doing something unbelievable in the semi-wet around Brazil and winning the Grand Prix, which is more impressive? What are most fans going to say?
1,000% the latter.
Exactly. So in that sense, I do think the driver is the most important thing in Formula One, and Formula One does need the drivers to be doing what they're doing. Yes, of course you can recreate the stars, as the famous phrase of Bernie Ecclestone, sort of 3 days after poor Ayrton passed away. Oh, just a light bulb, another one, put another one in. It's true. But whilst we have them, that's what they are. That is what makes the sport. It's not, people after Melbourne are not saying, wow, did you see what Mercedes did with that MG UK? Wasn't it unbelievable MG UK performance? Incredible how they ran. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, oh, Charles Leclerc into the first corner, aren't they? That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it is about drivers. And I think all these people that allowed the manufacturers to come in and dictate these rules have forgotten that. And who are these people? Well, they're the team owners for sure. It's the FIA and it's some other people. But, nobody had the gumption to stand up and say, this is wrong. This is what we need to do. We need to protect these corners. You tell me now what Copse Corner at Silverstone's going to be like.
Oh, no, Peter, don't do it.
That used to be one of the great corners. 130R at Suzuka, it was flat anyway, I know that. But now it'll be brake and shift probably.
Anticlimactic.
I mean, and some people, oh, well, that's because the cars have less grip. But okay, that's fine. I wish they did have less. It's great they have less grip, but we're not seeing that because they're going so slowly into the corner now at the end of the straight.
Yeah.
I love seeing less grip. I love seeing narrower tires. Brilliant. But, why slow the engines down like that? Why put so much emphasis on ruining the entry to the corner?
It's a bit of a problem, isn't it?
Well, more than a bit.
Yeah.
It's a massive problem. It's a massive problem.
Peter, let me ask you about...
I don't know, would it be impossible now suddenly to put MGUH back on all the cars, I wonder?
Well...
mid-season onwards?
Not impossible, but again, would Audi have bought into the current covenants as far as F1, right?
Yeah, but that's just one team. If they... Yeah. I mean, got to say here, full credit to Jonathan Wheatley. I mean, I wonder whether Jonathan knew about all of this stuff before he joined Sauber Audi. Because it reeks of Jonathan. What Jonathan did with the stewards in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix 21 to get that win for Max Verstappen. This kind of looks to be that sharp as well, doesn't it?
He races hard.
He's gone in there. He's got something that he knows Audi can do well, an engine without an MGUH. And he's gone in there and he's got points in his first race.
Fair play.
With a brand new engine.
He's not a bad...
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
No, he's not bad, Jonathan.
And I wonder whether that's, we should be giving Jonathan Wheatley a lot of credit here for what he's pulled off. But in answer to your question, if they pulled out tomorrow, Audi, I don't think it'd be a problem at all. Because I would imagine if they decided to pull out because the FIA have changed the regulations, I mean, the damage is done in terms of the money they've paid Sauber for the team. So Sauber are okay. They go back to being Sauber again. Everybody's got MGOH. Go on, let's go racing. That's all what would happen. Oh, sorry, your two Wall Streeters, your two guys, your two bankers having their bagel and cream cheese bagel over lunch are going to be saying, oh yeah, but Formula One's lost the plot now. They've lost Audi as a manufacturer. How can they call themselves a real sport without Audi? Yeah, right.
Go on, Mr. Windsor.
That's two guys that might be saying that.
Only two. Let me ask you about safety, because a lot was made at the start and people are concerned about the differential between some of the oncoming racers and the ones in front. And of course, I speak to Franco Colapinto and Liam Lawson, the incident that everybody feared that we may have on the starting grid, reminiscent of Riccardo Paletti 1982 Canadian Grand Prix. Do they need? What do they do to fix this, Peter? Because they said they were going to give the drivers an extra 5 seconds on the grid so they could spin for a very many different plates, get the turbo to where it needed to be, and the battery, and time all of these things and get off the line properly. And then they kind of they botch it a little bit. It felt like that they were quicker than normal as far as the reds, the 5 red lights to the green, and then you get a potentially very serious incident. But for the reactions, the cat-like reactions of Franco Colapinto, what do they do? What they change, Peter, to fix that and make it more safe off the line?
Well, the extra 5 seconds, all of those things, but of course that will increase heat as well in the whole thing. So it's almost 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Secondly, I think they did have that, didn't they? That pre-grid sign thing coming up, or pre-start, whatever it was, before the red lights came on. So they did actually have that extended time, which didn't seem to make a lot of difference. Thirdly, it wasn't just Liam. If you look at, I mean, I put out a thing when George was at about 110 kilometers an hour, what was everybody else doing at that point? And there's unbelievable variation. Some of them below 100, some of them up at 140. Lewis much quicker than Lewis, 146, I think, when George is doing 110. Massive variation throughout the grid. If you compare that with the same snapshot from the year before, you'd find very little difference between the cars at that point. So that's the first thing. And obviously Liam very slow, 46 kilometers an hour when George is doing 110. And as you say, Oliver Behrman has to make a very, very sharp move to the left, and he doesn't really know what's to his left, so that was dodgy. And he clears the vision for Colapinto, who does the only thing he can do, go between Liam and the pit wall. And to his credit, Liam keeps the thing in a straight line, which is what you got to do. First thing is, I wonder whether, is it absolutely impossible for a driver to put his arm up and wave in the way that they used to be able to do that? I don't think it is. I think they can get their hand off the wheel and get it out of the cockpit and at least wave so you can see something going on. So that's one thing. It's an old school thing, but I mean, I suppose H&S people would say, well, if you're going to be hit in the back, you definitely want to have both hands on the steering wheel. But we're kind of trying to avoid the accident here rather than sustain it. So that's one thing. And I suppose you could have galley lights on each row with a marshal looking at the car directly opposite him. And if that car, I don't know, you could probably have a setup whereby you have some sensors, whereby if that car hasn't reached the next row of sensors by a certain time, that red light comes on above that, and people behind can see that red light coming on and realize there's a car on that row going a little bit slower. Maybe you could do that sort of thing. Probably quite complicated to set that up. I don't know, particularly if you go to Peter Windsor's thing that the pole man should be allowed to decide which side of the grid he wants to start after qualifying, but that's obviously not happening. I think that's a great shame. I think it's still something that Formula One are missing big time if they really want to add to the excitement of it all. Anyway, I think the other problem, I mean, I'd like to say it was also the clean and dirty side of the grid which exacerbated it, but it didn't really, did it? And we saw some guys from the dirty side of the grid actually making very good starts because other people on the clean side were pretty slow. So it wasn't clean, dirty either. And I mean, clearly the Ferrari engined cars were all quick. All the customer cars were quick off the line as well. So there is something there, whether it's to do with the smaller turbos they're running. And that's, it probably is, I would imagine. So if that's the case, we're going to continue to have these speed differentials, aren't we?
I think they want them, Peter. They were out there.
Well, that's a worry. If they do, that is a worry because there will be a shunt then. If they want these speed differentials to continue, there will be a shunt.
100,000%, Peter. I'm convinced that. But again, if you say that F1 is content now and not a sports franchise, then of course you're going to want it's danger, and it's what will get the vibe. Like F1 were putting out these clips on Twitter of initially they didn't show it on the broadcast because it looked really, really dangerous. And again, that speaks to the propaganda thing that we spoke about before. But then on Twitter and social media, it was, oh, look at Colapinto's reactions and how good is this? And this is destruction derby. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like they're celebrating what I think is a massive potential mistake. It's a humongous risk that, again, to your point, Peter, that some of the biggest accidents and the biggest tragedies in F1 history have been caused by incidents similar to what we got on Sunday, Colapinto and Liam Law. I think they need to do something about it soon.
Well, I think you're right. And if you're right that they want an accident on the grid because it's going to be good for ratings and Twitter and short form video, then we'll have an accident, and then of course they'll react to it as low-grade people do. They react after the event rather than before it, and we'll have all sorts of changes. If that's what it takes, I'm very sad. Well, more than sad, I'm scared and sad and shocked, to be honest, if that is the case.
Yeah.
Because there is absolutely no point in having such rigid rules around the safety protocol of a Grand Prix circuit in terms of if there's debris on the track, you've got to put out the VSC. The marshal isn't allowed on the track until he's told that he can do so. In the old days, you just run across the track and there are no cars coming. If we've got all that protocol in place, how can they possibly say, well, we quite like having all this speed differential off the line because it could be a nice accident and somebody might get hurt. Wouldn't that be good for TV? I mean, that is just insane. And I just hope you're not right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just looks and feels like that's where they're going. Otherwise, why would they put out those clips, Peter? It feels like they're looking for the next viral moment. The second that Liam Parker says, this is content, this is not a sport anymore, that makes you know what they're looking for, right? If it's
that's why we just need to have the drivers on the grid driving these driverless cars on their computers, and they can have lots of crashes and they look spectacular, and you can watch Max's face as his car goes end over end through turn 7, and they can all have a laugh and go and look at the colour of their trainers. I don't know.
Satire. Mario Kart. This is the Mario Kart era of Formula One. Let me talk to you about Mercedes' advantage, Peter. Some said that it was going to be anywhere between half a second and 0.6, and then George rocks up in qualifying and dunks on the rest of the field to, what was it, 0.8? It was a massive advantage. Does this hinder Formula One and this content creation era. Now that Mercedes have got this advantage, not just is it compression ratio, it feels like they've got a pretty sorted package as well, that they can carry speed through the turns when it's not the carbon harvester championship. Do you think that they need to amend those rules before June the 1st, the compression ratio ones, with a view to level for the competitive landscape?
Well, first thing is I should congratulate you, Cameron, because you've been saying for a long time how Mercedes was sandbagging and they were going to disappear into the distance in Melbourne. And people like me, in the hope that you were wrong, kept saying, oh, I'm not sure, what about McLaren? What about Max? What about Ferrari? I was kind of saying that in a sort of Rob Walker-esque way. Rob Walker, of course, being the private entrant for whom Sterling Moss drove and won several Grand Prix, as did Joe Siffert. And Rob always used to bet against himself, his own cars, before a race, because
as an
it would be a nice surprise if he won, and it wouldn't be a disappointment otherwise. And I quite like that attitude. And I was kind of doing the same thing. I was saying, well, McLaren are going to be really good, in the hope that it might have some energy. But of course it didn't. And Mercedes did disappear, as we all knew they would. And I don't know, in answer to your question, we've had some good Mercedes dominating years in the racing between the two drivers. Obviously, Lewis, Nico particularly. Sterling Moss, Fangio, 55 was pretty good too. If we have a really big race between Kimi and George throughout the year, and they're allowed to race and have one another off and have lots of drama and lots of content for Formula One, then I think it'll be a pretty good year, even between those two. Will the compression ratio thing make a change? I doubt it'll make a change. I mean, I'm only saying that from a cynical, historical point of view. Whenever a team is deemed to have some sort of significant technical advantage and the FIA are persuaded by the other teams to get on top of it, typically when they do, it makes no difference whatsoever. So, I think a good example of that was kind of the McLaren brake steer thing, wasn't it? They had that in 97, and then it was discovered by Darren Heath. Great job as a photographer, discovered. He put the camera down inside the cockpit, saw this extra pedal. Good on him. Steve Nichols' brake steer, and so they banned it. And Ferrari worked very hard to get it banned, but it didn't actually make any difference. I mean, who won the world championship in 98 and 99?
Yeah, of course, it was Mika.
Yeah. So I don't think it'll make a lot of difference, and it'll just add to Mercedes' kudos, won't it? That they, despite everything FIA and the world have thrown at them, they still won the world championship. Yeah. It'll be that sort of thing. The only hope is that it's going to be a very close battle. I mean, it's just a shame in this. I mean, I love the balance of George and Kimi. I think it's a great team. If you're racing Charles and Lewis and you're racing Max and Isaac. But if that's the only thing we got in town, it's just Mercedes and it's George versus his teammate, in a way, it's kind of a shame that it's not Lewis in the car now, or Charles, or Max, or anybody else. Then we'd have a championship, wouldn't we? Wouldn't be really complaining, would we? We'd be saying, "Wow, this is mega." I mean, it's not in any way to decry Kimi's talent. He's very, very good, but I don't think he's as good on fast corners. Maybe that's not as big a deal anymore, and that's so he'll probably be with these new regs. So he'll probably be nearer George than he would have. And it may be very, very close between the two. I can see Kimi winning, 4 or 5 good races this year. And I can see him being super quick around Monaco, for example. So, yeah, we'll wait and see on that. I don't think that compression ratio thing change will make a lot of difference, to be honest.
Yeah, fair.
And of course, the other point we haven't mentioned about Mercedes is at least they didn't make any mess ups with their strategy. Not difficult when you've got that much advantage and you're cool and you're relaxed and you know that you're kind of playing with Charles and it's not, you're going to win the race and you're giving fans a bit of a thrill by allowing all these overtakes and stuff, and you're just looking after the car and you've got 2 seconds in hand. It's not very difficult to keep a clear head and bring both cars in, stack pit stop and do everything perfectly. Which is what Ferrari did not do, of course.
Insane. Absolutely insane. Peter, just before we get onto Ferrari's strategic ineptitude, do you think Ferrari have built a car quick enough for Charles Leclerc to keep George Russell and Mercedes honest? I mean, given the fact that Albert Park is a very energy-hungry track, I mean, we go next to, I want to say it's China and Japan, potentially similar, but when we get to Europe, you'd guess that every track is an Albert Park or Monza, right? And that potentially Ferrari, in the hands of Charles and or Lewis, might be able to keep Mercedes and George more honest than they did at Albert Park.
Well, I think the first thing is that with the smaller turbos that they've got, I think if it's remotely wet or semi-wet, I think Ferrari will be right there. And I think they'll have a race-winning car. So roll on the bad weather in Europe. No doubt it'll be an incredibly hot summer, given the way things are going. I think they've got a pretty good car all round. And the argument is, not that I really understand the nuances of all this, but if they can go that well around a circuit like Albert Park, energy harvesting wise, then on other tracks they're going to be closer to Mercedes. But that's on the assumption that Mercedes just sort of stay where they are and Ferrari get a little bit nearer. But of course, Mercedes aren't going to stay where they are, even though they're going to lose the compression ratio thing. This was the first race for Mercedes, and they probably never pushed that car to the limit at any stage of the weekend, I would guess, and apart from Kimi going off and doing a few things. But look how well he drove in a car that was damaged and wasn't even set up in qualifying. I mean, that more than anything showed how quick the Mercedes is, in my view. And George could just breeze through the pole there, and Max was out of it, so he could relax completely. Not that Max was ready in his peripheral vision, but at least it sort of meant, well, forget that. And then you got Oscar shunting. I mean, nothing gives a driver like George in a great race car more confidence than seeing a guy like Piastri in the wall on the formation lap. Well, sorry, on the out lap. And that's another point, isn't it? I'm sorry to diverge, but when you've got three of the world's best drivers, Kimi Antonelli, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, all being made to look like idiots by new types of Grand Prix cars, admittedly not Mercedes, factory car, then there's a bit of a pattern there, is there not? It's not just coincidence, I think. There is a pattern there. And what is the pattern? These are guys that are on the limit. That's one thing. And they're very, very good. Okay, Oscar wasn't on the limit, but he was on the limit without knowing it, because incredibly, because the rear tires weren't up to temperature, and because he had a right rear up on the curb, and because he was putting the power on at that moment, the tires slipped on the curb, and because it slipped, it spiked the engine and went up 100 kilowatts. And that's, I suppose that could have happened to anybody except a Mercedes driver. But it doesn't say much about these cars, I think, because a guy like Oscar Piastri, if he's good at one thing, I'll tell you what it is, it's power oversteer. That guy is very, very good at power oversteer, and he was just a passenger. And if Max is good at one thing, it's the approach to a corner and the perfect application of the brake pedal pressure. And he was made to look like an idiot as well. And Kimi Antonelli, well, that was just a young kid trying too hard, I think, in a car that made him feel very, very good, probably overconfident. So, yeah, that's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
That is a little bit worrying.
And we saw Charles go off a few times as well. He didn't hit anything.
No.
Obviously not in the race, but he didn't hit anything. And I don't know, what were we talking about? There's so many things, aren't there? So many strands to this whole situation in which we find ourselves.
There are indeed. Peter, let me ask you about, since we touched on Ferrari, again, I want to come away from the rules for a second, because I think it's that dangerous topic. We could talk about that for another 90 minutes, let alone another 10 on 5. But I want to ask you about Ferrari, because, again, the argument's broken out in the Tifosi, being that on one side of the fence, you've got some people saying, well, you know what? The virtual safety car pit stop is a bit of a misdirection, because ultimately Mercedes had the durable, a competitive advantage, and had the quicker car. It wouldn't have made any difference. On the other side of the fence, you've got strategic minds like Bernie Collins saying, if there is a virtual safety car and you need to make a pit stop, then you make the pit stop. No more complicated or simple than that. What do you say to that, Peter? Did Ferrari make a mistake strategically again?
I think Bernie's right. But I see it from a slightly different position, as I suppose. I mean, basically, the strategy departments of the teams have locked everyone, and including themselves, I think, into thinking in terms of, as we go into Melbourne, good example, is this a one-stop or a two-stop race? And that's their premise of where they start, I think, their calculations of what they're going to do and when they can come in and when the pit stop window's open and what they would do if there was a BSC or a safety car. It's based on on roughly whether they're going to make it a 1 or a 2 stopper and what is the best way to do this race. I always look at it from a completely different perspective, which is that if you start on the medium with this driver and you've got this situation going on, how long is he going to be able to make those tires last if he's not in dirty air and he's doing this sort of lap time? And then, because things may change after 10 laps, the track might get oil, might do this, might do that. And you make your decision on the fly based on what is going on around you, rather than locking yourself into a program of a 1 or 2 stop strategy. And I think in the case of Max, for example, I know I'm not answering your specific question about Prime, but in the case of Max, for example, I think they went into that race thinking, this race is pretty hard on tyres for us so far. It's a 2-stop race. Oh, he's at the back of the grid. We'll put him on hards. And that's why, ludicrously, I think they brought him in the second VSC to take him off the hards after 18 laps. I mean, what's the point of putting him on the hards if you're going to bring him in after 18 laps? No point at all. Now, Max said, oh, well, they were graining quite a lot. Well, of course they were graining, but you're still going to gain track position even on graining hards. You run them at least half distance, and then you try and do the rest of the race on mediums if you want to do your 1-stopper. But if you're doing a 2-stop, it's ludicrous, I think, the way they did that. I just don't understand why they ran the race that way. And going back to Ferrari, I think he's right, but my point is that you actually have to feel the air, see what's going on. And at the moment that Charles was in front of George, and we had the VSC, and Lewis was in front of Kimi, it was pretty clear to me that there was absolutely no downside for Ferrari to come in to change tyres. Because even if George didn't come in then, Ferrari would be on fresh tyres, which is no bad thing. And if George, did come in, then they'd be on the same level field. They'd be on the same level playing field. So where was the downside? And on top of that, as we correctly know, it's a free pit stop. So where was the upside in staying out?
Insane.
There was none. And that's what I mean. You get into this thing of, oh, well, we got to stop at this point and this is a bit early, we'll stay out. Then you put yourself, I think that explains a lot of the poor decisions that have been made by the strategy departments of most of the Formula One teams over the years, that they get too fixated on a 1 or 2 or 3 stop strategy before the race even starts.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a punt on Max starting on hards, and let's face it, that was not even a consideration for Pirelli when they put out their potential race strategies for Melbourne. Starting on hards was not even in their gambit. Then you at least take advantage of that by keeping him out there for as long as you possibly can on those hard tyres.
Yeah. And
they didn't do that. And I thought the funniest moment of the race, as I said in my video, was both Charles and Lewis
just waiting for the
while the VSC was still on. They're going as slowly as they possibly could out of the second last corner in the hope that they're going to get a pit stop from Ferrari to come in and change tyres. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it's very easy to pontificate and say, well, they should have just taken the initiative and come in. But imagine the chaos then.
Yeah.
Imagine the chaos, suddenly scrambling to get the tyres out for Charles. And then you got Lewis right behind him doing a stacked pit stop, and there's tyres everywhere, mayhem, massive opportunity of Charles getting Lewis's tyres and vice versa, and the whole thing being a complete and utter mess. So I guess that's why they stayed out.
Yeah.
But I mean, what a shame. But having said that, they still would have lost the race, so it didn't make that much difference.
I mean, but Peter, this is what I've heard a lot of Ferrari fans saying, that listen, it makes no odds, but surely in Formula One, where every decision counts and it's a story told in tenths, your ability to win races and therefore championships is about your cumulative good decision making. So you invest in the process, and if there is an opportunity to get a cheeky discounted virtual safety car pit stop, then you you take it, even if it means ultimately. How do you know that they wouldn't? I mean, George, the pressure on George, or something could have happened. There could have been a mistake. I just don't understand it. Peter, I want to ask you this question.
Well, no, I mean, just on that point, I don't think George would have felt any pressure regardless of what happened. I think he still would have won it. I think Kimi still would have been second, and the result was the result we got. But there is a cumulative thing, and it's put very simply: you make one mistake, and then you panic because you don't want to make the same mistake. And then you probably go too far in the other direction and you don't keep a cool head. And that's been Ferrari's problem for the last 18 months, actually. Fred Vasseur, please advise.
Incredible, Peter. And I think there's something more, even though they've built a very good car now, maybe not a championship winning one, but capable of winning races for sure.
Yeah.
It feels like there's always been this thing at Ferrari. The meme goes, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, because they don't have this, they don't critical think in real time. They're not agile enough as an organization to react to a virtual safety car. It's like they've got their playbook in front of them and it's like, oh yeah, no, tick, but yeah, no, that happened. They just lack for the they're not as nimble as a Red Bull have been historically. I heard Rob Smedley say that the reason for that is that there's this they don't foster this working culture of innovation. They don't allow guys and girls on the pit wall to make a decision and get it wrong. Everybody's always playing defense.
Lowest common denominator. They don't want to make a mistake. They just don't want, so therefore they don't make the right decision. That's the thing, isn't it? You've got to be brave enough to make errors and make mistakes in Formula One. Otherwise, you'll never get ahead. And count on one hand the number of people in the pit lane who stand out in that department. And indeed, the teams that allow people in the pit lane to do that anyway, as you say, they're all cosseted in these departments and strategy divisions, and they're all locked into these ways of thinking. And in the case of Ferrari, a lot of it is lowest common denominator. Whoops, we don't want to make an error, otherwise we might lose our job.
Unbelievable, Peter. This is
it is. But then we've seen it for so long now. We assume it's not going to change because it continues to go. And and the Ferrari PR machine doesn't help either, does it? It doesn't admit mistakes like that. It's, we're just unfortunate with the way the strategy worked out, and they drove flawless races and all this stuff, and great pit stops, and it's it's sad to see. But I personally don't think it would have changed the results at all. But we'll wait and see how it goes in future races.
Yeah, here's hoping. I mean, there were positives over at Ferrari as far as the interaction between Santi, Lewis's race engineer, and Lewis. That sounded a bit more positive. But again, like you said, the story of Ferrari for me was seeing Lewis and Charles just crawling around the final or the penultimate turn,
hoping they're going to get the call.
Unbelievable, Peter.
But it is incredible to me that, again, I made this point many times, but when you think about all the success that Lewis particularly had at ART in the days of Freddie Vasseur, and okay, Charles was a Prema guy, but ultimately Freddie knows what he's doing in theory on the pit wall. And it's astonishing to me that he hasn't got on top of that problem. And if necessary, just overrides everybody, says, bring these guys in a sort of, Jonathan Wheatley sort of way.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that.
No.
I don't know why he doesn't do that.
Is this the Ferrari organisational shackles again hindering the team as a Frederick Vasseur's inability to circle the wagons around the race team to ensure that they're not infected by osmosis, by all the politics that John Elkann kind of engendered.
But all that means is just taking charge and when necessary, overriding everybody and just saying this is what's going to happen and getting on with it.
Yeah.
Patrick Head-esque way. And that still can be done. And I guarantee that's what Jonathan Wheatley's doing right now at Audi.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Sauber sort of infrastructure that he probably just said, well, you may well have done that for the last 15 years, but you ain't doing it now. Get on, do this. It'd be like that. And that's how you've got to be. I've always said that. And to his credit, I think Adrian's probably doing that as well. And he's obviously got a lot of issues, but good racers do operate like that. And I've always thought of Freddie Vasseur as a good racer, but he's not doing it. He's either lacking confidence or he's just not, he thinks his days are numbered and isn't going to be around too long, and he's thinking about going fishing in Lake Geneva or something. I don't know.
Do you think he will? But the rumour is that he's got 5 races to turn this ship around, Peter. Do you think there's Is there F1 fire to that F1 smoke, do you think?
Well, you could argue he's already blown it with the whole strategy thing in Melbourne, regardless of what happens from now on, because that should not be happening, and it shouldn't be happening after all the other dramas Ferrari have had with strategy over the last couple of years. And if he hasn't changed things to the point where it prevents what we saw in Melbourne, then he hasn't done it, has he? That's what he would argue, well, the car's much better now, and look at us, we're a much more competitive team, and we're going to win a couple of races coming up. I'm sure he'll be saying all that. But ultimately, you've got to get the strategy right as well.
Yeah. As we round third, Peter, super generous with your time as always. Can I ask you about some Sir Lewis Hamilton? Because there is speculation amongst the fan base that Sir Lewis Hamilton is on for his 8th this year, that he looks renewed. He said that he forgot who he was last year, and that's why he got all of the negative comments coming into this year, that his DNA, quote, is on the car, that he's been invested in it, that he's been... it has the handling dynamic that he likes. He can be last of the late breakers, brand new rule and reg spec. No longer is it the ground effect era car that he hated. Is this... are these Lewis Hamilton pipe dreams, Peter, if we're having the conversation under the aegis of an 8th, or does he have a real shot of winning a record-breaking 8th World Drivers' Championship?
I think he has as good a chance as Charles Leclerc to win the World Championship. Well, that's a pretty neutral statement. I do think, as I said in the video last night, I do think these regulations have, and as I said earlier in our chat, have neutralized the early corner phase talent of Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen to the point where those two guys aren't able to do much more than the rest of them out there. And the rest of them out there, sadly, at this point includes Lewis. So all of a sudden, I don't think there's a massive difference between Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, because everything that Charles used to do better than Lewis, you can't do with these cars. You can't get into a corner as early as Charles, carrying as much speed as he does, down to a very low minimum speed rotation point, and then create a very early exit. You can't do that. You've got to harness all your power under braking. And as Lewis says, if you've got a good feel for braking really late, and I would actually question his description of braking super late, because I never, prior to 21, I don't think he was a great late braker. I always think Nico braked later than Lewis on the same set of tyres, given the same parameters. Lewis's thing was always slightly earlier, get stability, get the cadence of the braking perfect, which he was brilliant at. But now I think the way he drives now, and has driven since 22, is brake in a straight line, late as possible, get on the power as soon as possible. And in that sense, you don't feel as if you're losing very much with all this power harvesting under braking. Whereas Charles will feel horrendous going into corners. He'll feel so slow going into corners. But he's actually just going about the same speed as Lewis now. That's the thing. And I believe because of that, because that sort of element of the way Charles and Max can create corners has gone away, it's been neutralized is the better phrase, I think guys like Lewis will be in better shape to do well. And that's why, George was never brilliant in that area either, but it's not hurting him now at all, is it? He's just super, super precise, very, very good on throttle application, very good on all these inputs, and you'll get better all the time now because you get more and more confident. And yeah, so I think Lewis will be, if Ferrari have a race-winning car, which I think they do from time to time, not a championship-winning car, but a race-winning car, I think Lewis will have his share of wins, yeah, definitely.
Oof. You've said something there, Peter. That's bonkers.
No, not really. I've always said, in a good race-winning car, Lewis can still win races. I've never stayed away from that. And I think Ferrari do have a good race-winning car now. So, and particularly if the conditions are a bit dodgy, watch for Lewis Hamilton, for sure. He'll be up there with Charles. But I've always also said, if they do have a race-winning car and it's capable of winning a championship, I believe over a season it'll be Charles that'll have more points and will beat Lewis. So for Lewis to win his 8th, he's got to beat Charles Leclerc. That's the bottom line in the same car. And I think that'll be over a 22 or 24 race championship. That'll be a big ask for Lewis. But but for Lewis fans, I think you can look forward to some Lewis wins this year. Proper Grand Prix wins, as distinct from sprints.
I've got to hold some corn then, Peter, myself, because I thought Lewis at 41 years old had lost himself a tenth or two, that there was no way that he could get within 25 points over the course of a season of Charles Leclerc, that Charles Leclerc's in his prime, 28 years old, just got married. Even with the new rules and regs, I was convinced that Charles Leclerc would put, at the very least, 25, maybe even 50 points over the course of the 2026 season on Lewis. You don't think that's quite right?
Well, I don't think Lewis has as many disadvantages now. I think Charles has lost some advantages, and I don't think Lewis has as many disadvantages with these cars because of the way they're so boring into corners now. Yeah. That's what I think. And again, that's not to decry Lewis, because what a brilliant career, and the age he is and the achievements he's got. All it means is 2026, focus on the next race. Lewis Hamilton has a very good chance all of a sudden. That's what it means.
Incredible, Peter. Final question, mate, from me. Thank you so much for your time as always. Aston Martin, Adrian Newey, team principal. What did you make of Adrian fielding questions in the team principal press conference? I know we said that the team principal moniker was just, its value was nominal only, allowed Adrian Newey to do what he needs to do organisationally to build a fast race car. But it looked and felt like Adrian Newey, that he wasn't invested in this answering the questions stuff that team principals have to do in 2026. Do you think?
No, I don't think it's his scene at all.
No.
Some of them love it, don't they? But I don't think it's Adrian's scene. But I think he felt, knowing Adrian, that given the severity of Aston's position at the moment, it was important that he is out there not ducking the microphones or the cameras and actually, looking everybody in the eye. And I think that's what he did. And I cynically said I don't believe all that stuff about hurting the backs of the vibration. I think they've got a vibration, like a lot of people. Maybe it's a little bit worse, and that is the problem that the battery has. That it's vibrating itself apart. But I don't think the FIA / Liberty liked it very much when Adrian said, I don't know if it was Adrian or somebody said from Aston, that Melbourne will just go and park the car after one lap. I don't think that's what. I don't think that's what your two Wall Street bankers over their cream cheese bagels actually want to be hearing, do they? The great manufacturer Aston Martin parking the car after one lap. But if, however, the poor drivers have got a terrible back pain because of the vibration, that's a different thing. Oh no, you don't want that. Don't want to hurt anybody. So health and safety came to the rescue there, I think, and that's why they sort of went down that path. But I would be willing to bet that if the battery problem had been solved on the Thursday night of Melbourne, and the power unit ran perfectly with vibration, and the car continued to just get better every lap, and that was reliable, I think Fernando Alonso would have done full Grand Prix distance without a problem. He might have had a sore back, but I think quite a few people probably had a sore back when they got out of the cars. So I think it's all about the battery at the moment and just getting that reliable. Be interesting to know what's going on right now, wouldn't it, at Honda, because the Japanese Grand Prix isn't too far away.
Yeah.
They don't need to be stopping after 10 laps with both cars at Suzuka, do they? And equally, Honda have a lot of tentacles in Japan in terms of getting things done quickly. And yeah, obviously I think they had a McLaren applied battery when they were with Red Bull, and then they began to phase that out, as Scarb said. But I think they've gone to a third-party battery supplier, and it's not working, and they need very quickly to get on top of that. And I can't imagine it's that difficult. I mean, if a guy like Adrian applies himself to battery technology for 4 days, surely he's going to know everything there is to know about battery technology, isn't he? And he's going to go out there and create something pretty special. So we'll probably find an Adrian Newey battery in the back of the car before long.
Mate,
or the front of the car, wherever they have it, the middle of the car, the side of the car. Where is the battery on these cars? I have no idea.
I think he wanted it at the back by the engine, didn't I think that's the problem.
And that's the other problem, of course. He may well have gazumped Honda into saying, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I want them much narrower here, and I want them much lower there, and I want to be able to fit this radiator there. And Honda had to go away and redesign the architecture of the engine. But that's possible, but yeah, I'm sure that did happen to some extent. But if Honda came back and said, well, we can't do that in the time frame, Adrian, it's not possible to do. Adrian wouldn't have said, well, you're going to do it regardless. He would have said, oh, okay, right, well, let's work around that. He's not an idiot, is he? So I think you can only take that argument so far. assuming you're not taking the argument that Adrian's a senile old man that doesn't know what he's doing, which I presume some people are saying now. I'm not saying that, and I think he's brilliant, but still is. But overall, I'm sure some people probably are saying that, and why wouldn't they? Because the car's terrible.
It was interesting at the press conference, Peter, to hear Adrian almost minute that where it all went wrong. That he was asked, when did you realise that Honda was so behind as far as their PU and the battery? And he said that they went over to visit the factory in November of last year, and then they realised that all of the operational guys that so drove the success of Red Bull in 21, 22, whatever, that they'd all left to go and work on solar panels. He said that operationally they look completely differently, that they look completely different, that they'd gotten rid of a load of people, and then the cost cap came into play, and they'd not been able to hire them back. It's bonkers. This Adrian Newey Honda relationship is chaotic. I hope he can solve it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's Adrian being pretty honest. I mean, basically, what was he doing going there that late, and why did he only know about that late? I mean, that is inexcusable, really, for somebody with his experience, because when did he start wearing an Aston cap? Monaco last year, I think.
Yeah, March last
Yeah,
year.
why wasn't he in Japan after Monaco for a start? And secondly, I mean, why wouldn't he have been on top of that from day one? Or indeed Andy Cowell on top of that, having run Mercedes powertrains for so long? Why weren't they on top of that? The only thing I'd say is that it's a bit of a cop-out to talk about the personnel changes, because that is not unusual at Honda. And in my experience with Honda, they used to change them every 6 months. You get really good people, great engineers, good mechanics, get to know them all, get to know their names. Hi, how are you? Where'd you go last night? Everyone start to speak English, and bang, 6 months later, they'd be out back in Japan, and another group would be over. So there's nothing new there. And Honda do that. That's how they like to use Formula One. Correctly so, in a way. They're just training their guys, and it's considered to be a great honor to be put onto the Formula One program. And then you go away and design a solar panel or a Honda Civic front upright. And
Wow.
That's normal. And Adrian knows that. And he also knows November's much too late to be making those discoveries as well.
Yeah.
But at least he was honest about that. I guess he was just too busy on other stuff. That's all I can think of.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Here's hoping
but it's a massive mistake, though. I mean, you can't go there in November and suddenly realise that this isn't happening or that's not happening.
A day late and $1 short, unlike Adrian Newey. Although, is it unreasonable of us, Peter, to expect Adrian Newey to have his team principal fingers in all the pies before he's even team principal in March? Surely that's not his. Is that his role in March when he's hired as a technical director to go and handhold Honda?
Absolutely, totally. The technical director's in charge of the engine program as well. Of course he is. Yeah. And he should have been over there. He should have been over there designing the engine for them, doing whatever. It's ludicrous. What was he doing between March and November if he wasn't in Japan? I don't get it. The most critical part of the new car was going to be the power unit, always.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. Do you think he could turn it around by the end of the year, Peter?
Yeah.
Aston Martin winning races?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it'll be a quick car by the end of the year. Interesting thing then will be what happens with Fernando. Probably too late then. And what you haven't asked me, what we've been talking about a lot over the last 18 months is this. You've always saying, Max is going to Mercedes, Toto with Max, what's going to happen? And I've always been saying, well, let 26 happen and then we'll see where Max wants to go. And it's the same with the Aston question, isn't it? I mean, if Max hasn't signed for anybody, including Red Bull, by September 26, and George is walking away with the World Championship, and Toto's on the phone saying, I will replace you and you can drive alongside Antonelli, and George is going to Ferrari, Lewis is retiring. And simultaneously, Fernando Alonso has just won 3 Grand Prix, but he's out of the World Championship because it's all much too late. And Stroll's on the phone saying, we're going to get rid of Fernando, Max, we want you to be number 1 here for the next 4 years. Where would Max go?
You asking me, Peter? This is a question.
Yeah. Oh. You're always asking me this stuff. That to me is a much more relevant question than the questions that used to be asked in 2025 and 24 about Max going to Mercedes in 26, which was never going to happen, in my opinion. And I was sadly to say I was correct.
You were spot on, Peter, as you usually are.
So my question is now is the time when Max could make a move. But if the Aston Martin is a really quick Adrian Newey car by September, would he go there or would he go to Mercedes if they don't have George in the other car? If it's Max and Antonelli?
I think if it's Max and Antonelli, I think given the fact that Mercedes and Toto have been very influential in reorganising the NLS calendar to facilitate Max doing 24 hours of Nordschleife for the Nürburgring.
And giving him a car.
And giving him a Mercedes AMGT. I think given the fact that we already know that there's been a gazillion conversations, Max has been on the yacht with Toto's private yacht, talking about what it would look like to have Max partner with Mercedes. I think given the fact that Ola Kalunius, one of the C-suite Mercedes execs, has already talked about how good Max would look in the black overalls of Mercedes. I think the evidence, and again, my crystal ball is as murky as the next person's, Peter, but if we're looking at the body of work, the evidence in totality, I think all roads point to Max Verstappen still joining Mercedes. If he's in F1 still, if we're working on that assumption, I think all roads point to Max joining Mercedes. I don't think Jos. I've heard it said that Jos always views Max as a gun for hire. Excuse the rhetoric, but that he doesn't. He's desperate not to have Max in the wrong place at the wrong time. That he doesn't want his career to fail as his did by being in a Benetton with Michael Schumacher. Do you know what I mean? Like he's keen to make sure that Max loses zero opportunity by having him in the right place at the right time. And I'd argue that as of the time of writing, in 27, that's more than likely going to be Mercedes. Not to say that...
Okay, so you got Max at Mercedes in 27 with Kimi, which means that George, instead of going to Ferrari, actually goes to Aston Martin alongside Stroll.
But what about
Charles? He's being paid, let's say, $300 million by Stroll to do that.
Oof.
Which means Lewis then stays at Ferrari for another year, because Charles has gone to McLaren.
Oof.
And you've now got Bortoleto at Ferrari alongside Lewis.
Or Behrman.
Yeah, good point. Okay, let's say Behrman in there. Actually, the other question you haven't asked me, which I was hoping you would, but and that is the following. Peter, when Oscar went to McLaren, you always said that was not the right thing to do. You made it clear that obviously if it was a clean sheet of paper and it was a choice between Renault or Alpine and McLaren, obviously you'd go to McLaren. But bearing in mind he'd been declared as the race driver for Renault, you always felt that ethically he should have stayed there, in the same way that some great drivers stayed with teams even without a written contract, and they had made that decision and they decided to race him. But nonetheless, he went behind their back, if you like, and went to McLaren because it was such a great opportunity. And I always made the point that if McLaren had kept Daniel, they still would have won the World Championship with Lando. Things would have worked out about the same, and there would have been less aggro in the team, because Daniel's a little bit more, bit more road dust on him and knows how to handle these situations, but he still would have been very quick and done a good job. And I replied, yeah, and that's right. And what would have happened then, I think, is that Oscar would have blown Ocon away at Renault, and he would have still been the man of the moment, having won F2, F3 championships. Everybody would have been talking about Oscar Piastri. And probably with Toto getting, cold feet over Lewis, he would have put Oscar in the other Mercedes. That's what I always said. And if he'd waited 1 year, he would have ended up at Mercedes. He would have got the Antonelli drive, and he'd be in Antonelli's car right now. And I'm surprised that you haven't said that to me, or reminded me that that's what I said. Because if you ask most Australian fans right now, where would they rather see Oscar Piastri driving in 2026, in a factory Mercedes or the McLaren, what would they say, I wonder?
Mercedes, probably.
That is exactly my point. And that's what I always said. I never said that, of course, he should have stayed at Renault because they're a better team than McLaren. All I said was, long term, if he stayed where he was, he probably would have ended up at a Mercedes. I also said maybe a Ferrari, and which is possibly the case. He might have gone to Ferrari, but he would have been in a Mercedes or a Ferrari, almost certainly, because he was that much a man of the moment.
Or a Red Bull, Peter.
Maybe even a Red Bull. But I think if he got the Toto offer, he would have gone to Mercedes, in my gut feeling. That's what Mark would have gone for.
Wow.
Instead of which they rushed into the McLaren thing, and he almost won a championship last year, won plenty of Grand Prix, very good. Now, not looking quite as good as Kimi Antonelli.
Oh, wow.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
So you're going to ask me that question?
No. Playing sliding doors F1. I would counter to that though, Peter, and say surely. I mean, a bird in the hand is always worth two in the bush, though. And you
but he had a bird in the hand. He had the Renault drive, and he had an easy guy to beat in a car in which he could only look good, and he would have looked quite good in that car because he's very good. There's nothing better in your, in your early stage of your career to be in a team on the way up, or that's midfield at best, with a teammate you can blow away. You can only look good in that situation. Yes, of course, McLaren's a great team, and if he stays at McLaren for the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure he'll win a world championship. All I'm saying is, I don't think I was wrong in saying if he'd stayed at Renault, he would now be in a Mercedes, and he'd probably be potentially able to win a world championship this year.
That's really brave, but brave and very insightful, Peter. No, I just push back on you.
It's brave. It's just logical to me.
I think, I was listening to, I don't know, a footballer, Gareth Bale. I was listening to a podcast recently, and he said he had the opportunity to join Man United at the time, the biggest football club in the world. And he had the opportunity to join Tottenham Hotspur, not such a big team. And he ultimately elected to join Tottenham Hotspur because he knew that he would get it. It suited where he was at that point in his career. And I think that's super. But that's what you're asking Oscar Piastri to do. I think that's really, really brave, because sometimes you might go to Alpine and never, ever get the opportunity to go to a Mercedes or but
he would have, and it didn't require bravery because he had the drive. It would have required bravery if at that point Renault Alpine was saying, well, we hope to put you in the drive, Oscar, hope to give you the drive, can't make our mind up yet, but you've done a good job in testing, you're the third driver, maybe, and simultaneously Zach's on the phone saying definite offer, race seat at McLaren. Then obviously you go to McLaren. But they weren't saying that. They were saying he is the race driver. They put the press release out. It was out. He was the race driver alongside Ocon. So,
I think
end of story. It required no bravery at all. All it was 1 year of commitment in a relatively poor team, alongside a teammate he would have blown away, and all the stock around Oscar Piastri would still have been climbing. As a result,
I think you're right, Peter. But you just can't. I'm not sure you can play these sliding door F1 games where F1 maths doesn't always work out. Who knows? Oscar could have gone to or stayed at Alpine and gotten destroyed by a couple crashes, a couple Monacos, and Esteban Ocon all of a sudden looks like the hot prospect instead of Oscar Piastri. So it's like,
yeah, but he's good enough. No. I mean, if it was a normal guy, yes, but he's a very, very good driver, Oscar Piastri. He would have maximised his time at Renault. He would have gone as well as that car could have gone. Yeah, he would have had the odd off, but he would have done as well as, I don't know, Isaac Hadjar looked last year, or maybe Lindblad is looking right now. He would have been that sort of talking point, for sure. Every race, he would have been right there. He might have had, as I say, the odd incident, and he may not have finished many races in that car, but everyone would have said, wow, but Piastri's over-delivering on that car. That's all you need. It's all you need in Formula One. You're over-delivering, and then you're immediately a flavour of the month, of the year, as he would have been. That's my point. Anyway,
I think
that's my point, and I think it didn't require bravery, because actually it required bravery to walk away from a team which has already announced you as a racing driver. That required some bravery, because it's a different sort of bravery. It was a moral thing and ethical thing. That came into it as well. But anyway, I just wanted to say that, because right now Oscar Piastri could have been in Antonelli's car had he stayed at Renault in the Australian Grand Prix.
There is 100% a moral. I mean, they call it contractual fulfillment, right? If you take all of the testing days that Otmar had paid for, then you've kind of you've almost agreed implicitly that you're going to stay on as a driver, because those testing days come. I mean, they're not cheap, are they, Peter? They're like,
no, they're not cheap.
hundreds of
But
thousands.
again, that's almost beside the point, because even if Otmar, whoever was in charge at the time, I don't know if it was Otmar specifically. I mean, he was there obviously, but whether it was all him, I don't know. But whoever it was, if they'd said to Oscar, look, we haven't got a proper contract with you, and you could walk out of this team tomorrow if you want to, but we are announcing you as the race driver. We want to race you next year. That's enough. That is enough. You know, based on everything you've done with the team and they've done with you, and they've now declared you as the race driver, that's enough. You don't need anything more than that. Yeah. And of course he was able to walk away and went to McLaren, because he did, and there was no legal repercussion at all. My point is that at that stage, he didn't actually need even to make that decision, because had he just stayed where he was, worked at exactly the same level that he took to McLaren, he would be probably in the Kimi Antonelli car today.
It's an interesting one, Peter. This will be discussed.
Well, more than interesting, because I think that means you'd have a better chance actually of winning the World Championship this year than he had last year.
Wow.
Because they had to beat Red Bull and everybody else last year. But this year, he's only got to beat one guy. He's got to beat George, which I think he's possibly capable of doing.
Wow, you'd back him to beat George in equal machine.
Well, you know, if it's just him and George throughout the year, it's different if you've got other factors coming into play, like the Red Bull Max Verstappen factor, for a good example. And I think, it would have been close. It would have been a great season, if nothing else, for Formula One, wouldn't it? Yeah. It was Oscar Piastri, George Russell right now. Everyone would be quite excited, would they not?
No, agreed. It would be incredible, Peter. Blimey, Mr. Windsor, fantastic F1 conversation as per usual. The insight's not lost on me, sir, and I thank you for that. More than words can convey. If you enjoy yourself some Peter D. Windsor insights and you are not subscribed to his YouTube channel, then reconcile the diff for me, square that circle. Go and do that now. Shortly thereafter on your favourite podcasting platform. Short Corners is the pick to click. 5 stars and a follow. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, like, comment, share, subscribe and hype. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, 5 stars and a follow. On the right side of your screen, that's been the legend, the goatiest of all goats to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor. I, as always, have been your boy Cameron CC. Until next time, between now and next time, may all your sectors be purple.